And so I've been asked to give a brief overview of the Bishops' Conference and how it relates to the interests of workers. And then I'll move through some of the policy issues we've worked for on this year that I think will be of interest. So first, for those of you unfamiliar with the conference, the USCCB is the platform for the bishops to collaborate on national issues and the voice of the Catholic Church to the branches of the federal government. So we bring forward issues of Catholic social teaching to political leaders, and we try to make the case for the dignity of the human person and the common good. My department, Justice, Peace, and Human Development, has two policy offices, one domestic and one international, as well as the Catholic Campaign for Human Development, which many of you are familiar with because from their decades of involvement with labor and community organizing. We also have an education and outreach office, which, among other things, is the office primarily responsible for organizing and putting on CSMG. So you have them to thank for everything being so well organized and the signs, and they really run this gathering like clockwork. So the largest department at the USCCB is Migration and Refugee Services, which advocates for policy and also oversees the largest refugee resettlement operation in the United States. So just to give you a sense of how things are organized among the bishops, each set of issues is overseen by a committee, and the members of the committee are bishops. The chairman of each committee is elected by the full body of bishops to serve a term of 3 years. So the current chairman of the Committee on Domestic Justice and Human Development is Archbishop Paul Coakley of Oklahoma City, who took over for Bishop Frank Duane of Venice, Florida, in November when his term was up. And I know that Archbishop Coakley wanted to be at CSMG this year, but he has a good excuse. He was summoned to Rome for his ad limina visit with Pope Francis. So maybe next year, but the boss does get priority. So the Office of Domestic Social Development tracks over a dozen issues, including labor and work, criminal justice reform, healthcare, affordable housing, taxes, safety net, and care for the poor. We work with our colleagues in the Office of Government Relations to reach out to offices of members of Congress and the White House, as well as our friends in the General Counsel's Office for amicus briefs or administrative comments. And with that, I'm going to transition to some of the issues we've taken up in the past year, and this will just be kind of a quick summary. It was not a surprise that with a divided Congress beginning in 2019, there would be less legislation moving this year than in previous years. As has been a trend for several years now, the executive branch kind of moves to make policy through administrative rulemaking when that is not going to go through Congress. So that has required us to engage in the administrative comment process when these rulemakings come up with our issues. And I think the last time I was here, I discussed our comment opposing the administration's proposed changes to the public charge rule that would deny immigration status to migrants who lack either certain financial resources or access otherwise lawful safety net benefits. There has been more of the same this year, and my colleague Julie Bodner deserves the credit for doing the work on these. I want to just highlight 6 comments that we submitted on issues that affect the poor and vulnerable. So
it's hard to hear in the back.
Oh, it is? Sorry, I'm coming down with a cold. I'll try to project. Does that work? Okay. Again, 6 comments. So number 1, a comment opposing proposed changes to the way that poverty is measured that would result in fewer people being eligible for poverty assistance programs. Number 2, opposing changes to the payday lending rule that would take away certain safeguards to avoid issuing loans that people can't pay back. Number 3, opposing the elimination of HUD assistance for mixed status families, which would cause, by one count, 25,000 mixed status households, including 55,000 children who are eligible for assistance, to choose whether to endure family separation or lose assistance. And then also 3, comments on SNAP programs. One, opposing the elimination of state work requirement waivers for able-bodied adults without dependents where there is persistent unemployment above 6.9%, which would cause nearly 700,000 people to lose SNAP. Opposing changes to categorical eligibility for certain SNAP beneficiaries that would at least temporarily or permanently cause 3.1 million people to lose benefits. And opposing changes to the way that the utility and allowance is calculated that would cause a $4.5 billion reduction in SNAP funding over 5 years. The Domestic Committee also joined the Committee on Migration to support the Farm Workforce Modernization Act in November, which passed the House in December. That act, which has broad bipartisan sponsorship, would create an earned legal status program for agricultural workers. It also improves labor protections, such as increased availability of farm worker housing and better health protections. It's a bipartisan bill, it's a compromise bill, but it's a step in the right direction, and it is rare to get a bipartisan bill right now. Finally, I'd like to draw your attention to the annual Labor Day statement from 2019. Last year was the 100th anniversary of the Bishop's Program for Social Reconstruction, which was one of the first major efforts from the USCCB's predecessor, the National Catholic Welfare Conference. And as Clayton said, it is a real example of the tradition and heritage that the bishops have in the United States. The Labor Day statement noted that, unfortunately, many of the issues for workers and families that were salient in 1919 remain with us today, and yet the hope is that some of the most recent research validates many of the proposed solutions as still good and vital ways to protect the dignity of workers and their families. And specifically, that statement lifted up opposition to monopolies, support for employee ownership, and support for unions. There were a lot of interesting discussions prompted by that statement, and hopefully will continue to draw attention to the problems the workers face and productive ways to move forward. So these are some of the ways that the USCCB has engaged with issues that affect workers and their families over the past year. I hope it was helpful. I'm looking forward to talking with you more during CSMG and hope that this gathering is a fruitful time for all of us to learn more about the Church's social teaching and to advocate for greater justice for the poor and vulnerable. Thank you for listening. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.